pending before the Ohio House is the Ohio Firearms Freedom Act. Essentially says this: if a gun is manufactured in the state of Ohio, it's stamped made in Ohio, it is sold to Ohio citizens, then all federal regulations regarding firearms are null and void. I probably don't, one of my friends that I've talked to quite often about this, Sheriff Richard Mack, has talked an awful lot about 10th Amendment sovereignty. Some of you may even be aware that the Democrat in this race, when Sheriff Mack's lawsuit was going up to the United States Supreme Court, this fellow was actually one of the lawyers that was filing briefs on behalf of the Brady campaign and against Sheriff Mack to try and stop his solution. Fortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the correct way in that case, but it doesn't end there. The Attorney General, through its litigation powers, can go further, in one area where we absolutely have to take action is to defend fellow states that are using state sovereignty, and here I'm talking about Arizona. Because if we don't stand up for our fellow states now, who's going to be around for us when it's our turn? Right? Now I can tell you both the Republican and the Democrat in this race are both open pro-amnesty supporters with a long record of supporting amnesty for illegal immigrants. Now this is a disaster, and I've seen it in my own community in Delaware, Ohio, and I used to be a prosecutor in Delaware, Ohio. Once a week there is a special docket of arraignments for Spanish-speaking, all Spanish arraignments, right? Now there are a few that are here legally, but in large part these are illegal aliens that are here in our communities. And this is what's going on. See, if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot and you get the $99 installation, right? You're going to get a subcontractor who's going to come out. They're using illegal labor. These folks show up, they case your house, they come back a week later and they rob you blind, right? Some of them are caught, and those are the folks that are showing up for, the arraignment day for the all Spanish arraignments. The R&D, they don't care because they're getting huge dollars. Because, what, Bank of America, you know how much money they make by giving these low-dollar credit cards to illegal immigrants here in this country? They make a mint, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're fine with it. And they're the lobbyists that pay these guys off. So the Republican and Democrats, when you look at their campaign financing, by golly, they've taken so much money from these banks, they could probably start their own bank. So we've got to bring an end to this, and we can use some appropriate tools to get it done. Now the question, I think, often becomes, what can we do about it? Is this so hopeless at this point that we should just give up? I would suggest to you, no. Think like a continental. Consider the sacrifice that the Continentals made in 1776. Time, treasure, risking their necks for the cause of liberty, because enough is enough. And aren't we to that point here today? Have we not reached that point already? Enough is enough. So we have to start thinking like Continentals. And that means more than just sending some emails around, liking some stuff on Facebook. Right? I'm talking about real action, boots on the ground, getting out there, contributing and investing in the cause for your state and your nation. And consider that, here today, we are very privileged and we are very blessed by God with the freedoms that we still have. And it doesn't take a lot to turn this thing around, but it does take some. It does take some. Now I can tell you in our own campaign, really a special storm that's coming together that gives us a path to victory. First of all, this is an apportionment board year, and let me explain what that means. Every 10 years, all the districts in Ohio, all the congressional districts, the state house, the state senate seats, are up for redistricting. And some of you may have seen we've got some district maps, in fact, in the back, and you see these crazy districts that look like that. Right? Now, they do that for a purpose, because whoever controls that apportionment board, right, controls how those districts are put together, and they do demographics. They look for how they can create the most number of districts that are leaning for this party or that party, right, so that they can get the lion's share of the graft. And I'm here to tell you that when you look at the Republicans and Democrats, and the reason why you will see, like I gave you the example of this prominent Youngstown family where they give pretty much the same amount to the Republicans and the Democrats, is for the most part, we're not talking about two different teams. We're talking about a you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back mentality. Right? But when apportionment board comes around, now see, this is 10 years of who gets the lion's share of the graft. Now we got a real fight. So there's 3 seats that are going to determine who's going to get the majority on the apportionment board, and that's governor, auditor, and secretary of state. And that's where the big money fight is in the 2010 election. In addition to that, there's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Ohio, and what many people don't understand is that the Chief Justice has the authority under Ohio law to pluck any trial judge off a case and replace him with any other judge they want. Right? So if you are a company and you want to make sure that you're going to be protected if there's any litigation, that's a guy you really want to be friends with. Because if you go to court and for some reason you get the wrong judge, they can just pluck that judge right off and put whoever they want right in. That's enormous power. And so as a result, all of the big party money is going to be focused on those races. And in fact, what you will see is that the Republican and the Democrat, money will be flowing out of their campaign into these other races. Because the Attorney General's office is still one of the chief fountainheads of graft, because they get to hide exactly what's going on. But this year, all the money has to flow out to these 3, really 4 key races. Right? That means that there is a weakness in the enemy in this particular race, a weakness we are ready to exploit. And exploit it we will. In 2008, I broke all records by an independent running for statewide executive office. We had nearly 250,000 votes, and it was completely unheard of to put together. I mean, we had 6 weeks to run this race. It was the special election after Mark Dan was kicked out of office. We had virtually no resources. Since that time, I have been on a statewide speaking tour. We have been putting together serious fundraising. We have been putting together a professional campaign team. And as a result, we need to generate campaign contributions between now and when the election comes around, $250,000. That allows us to go toe-to-toe with these guys. Now that's not a lot of money. Well, it's a significant amount, but it's very doable. Consider that if each of the people that voted for me just gave 1/100 of what we need, we would be at more than double our goal. And let me lay that challenge here before you today. To be 1/100th of 1% of what we need to reach our goal. Let me challenge you to make that investment in our campaign and what we can do to restore proper government here in Ohio. Let me close with this. There was a time when I was really getting involved in politics that I started surveying exactly what happened system, how our republic has been eroded by the progressivist left movement for so long. And it didn't just start with this Obama administration. It's been a lot longer than that in coming. Right? And I looked at the money, the power, the influence, the media behind the enemies of our republic, and I became very depressed. At that time, a good friend of mine, Mike Tomaso, said, well, maybe you have a lack of understanding of history. And he sat me down and we started going through the Old Testament. There's one story that really stands out in my mind and I think truly changed my attitude, and I'll share that with you here. It comes from the book of Judges, chapter 7, the story of Gideon. Now, in this Bible tells us that the sons of Israel were besieged by a massive army, hundreds of thousands of well-trained, well-equipped troops. And God tells Gideon to call forth the sons of Israel. Now you might think this grandiose army would show up, but that's not what happened. No, it was a bunch of fairly average citizens that showed up, the type that might bring their own lawn chairs, homemade signs, that kind of thing. Okay. And God tells them, well, you know what? All right, let's test these folks. First, there's a test of discernment. Or I'm sorry, test of courage. And he says, tell everybody who's afraid to just go home. Most of them went home. Right? And consider today what's going on. If you are part of this movement, right? You're told perhaps you're a racist or you hate poor people or something along those lines, right? And there's those that are afraid of that, so they stay home, they won't be involved. Most went home. So then God said, now let's give them a test of discernment, and he sent them down to the water to see who would act like an idiot and who would have that rock solid faith and that discernment. And here today, we're faced with that same challenge. Right? How often has it been told and ingrained in us, well, there's the Republicans and there's the Democrats, and perhaps if you're in the conservative movement, if they have an R by their name, then obviously that must be the guy to vote for. Now, for 100 years, that's what we've been working with. How's that working out for us? Right? How's that working out for us? So let's talk about results. Now, I was a student of military history, and the story goes on to give the first ever recorded nighttime commando raid. And that small ragtag bunch went on to victory. And it's telling for a couple reasons. One, consider the night before battle being part of that small group of Gideon's army that's left. Of this small band facing hundreds of thousands. Right? And knowing that the next day you're going into battle and it's life or death. Consider what it had to have been like to be there. First, you might think, please, no more tests. All right? But consider the faith that it took to stay there. And when victory was achieved, remember that the moral to this story is that when victory is had, the people will know that it is because of God victory was possible. Now here today, we can draw some direct parallels. We see the power and influence that the progressivists have over both parties. We see how small, and the media tells us how insignificant we are every single day. Well, I look at that situation and I think, we got them right where we want them, folks. Now's the time for action. I call for you to engage with me in action. On the back table, my campaign manager, Barry Sheets, is here tonight. We've got some volunteer sign-up sheets and some other ways you can get involved in our campaign. And I ask for your support. Together, we can have victory. Without question. Let's have faith. Thank you very much, and God bless you.